myself in a moment. We're doing this with the Trail Conference and with New Jersey Search and Rescue. All right, so if you type your name in the chat, that'll help us to know how much attended, how many people attended. We're going to have two question and answer sessions, one in the middle and one that's the end. If you're stuck on something, raise your hand. Kendra is assisting here, and she'll call my attention to it if there's a problem. This is a challenge for me. This is the first time I'm doing it as a webinar. I typically do this in the field. What part of the presentation will be things that I typically do with people on a hike. So we'll see how well we can make this work. All right, Kendra, you want to step in here?
Yeah, and just a quick FYI, in case people are not familiar with Zoom, when John references raising your hand, if you hover over your toolbox on the bottom of your Zoom, you'll see a item called participant, and if you click that open, there's an option there that literally says raise hand, and I can see when you've done that. So that's what he's referencing. So my name's Kendra Baumer. I am the Senior Engagement Manager with the Trail Conference. So just a quick history on us, in case you're not familiar with us. We were founded in 1920, so this is our centennial year. Very exciting. Obviously, we wanted to celebrate under lockdown. Just kidding, but this is why we're excited to host these types of digital engagement and be able to still connect with folks, through this time period. So our goal as the Trail Conference is to protect and maintain the trails and public lands in the New York, New Jersey area. And if John, if you'll flip to the next slide. There we go. So we do this by a group of over 2,000 active volunteers and also 54 AmeriCorps members. This is how we protect the trails and lands in the area. And we oversee a vast region. So if you take a look at the map, we operate in parts of central New Jersey, North New Jersey, New York City. In fact, we have 100 miles of hiking trails in New York City, in case you didn't know that, all the way up into the Hudson Valley, and our northernmost area is in the Catskills. Our office is in Mahwah and is in a public building, so you are welcome to stop by anytime. So that's just a quick history of the Trail Conference.
Okay, I'd like to tell you a little about New Jersey Search and Rescue, which is an organization I also belong to. We have a threefold mission: to provide, to protect, and to preserve. We provide education, training, and guidance to the members and to the general public in first aid, safety, CPR, search tactics planning, preventing search and rescue presentations, NASAR training, testing, and guiding hikes. There we go. This is one of them. So that's to provide. All right. We protect human life. We have a medical unit. We have a mountain rescue unit and an incident management unit to run searches. And we preserve. We originally come out of the New Jersey Forest Fire Service. Forest Fire Protection Education, Trail Conference member, and trail maintainers. I am a trail maintainer myself. All right. New Jersey Search and Rescue is, it searches, it does wilderness evacuation. If you get hurt in the woods, we're the ones that are going to carry you out. All right. All year round, in all conditions, 24/7. And every member is always ready to respond. And if you think it's hard walking on those rocks, think about what it is carrying a stretcher on those rocks. Can you see it? Yep, there we go. That's what it's like taking a stretcher down a mountain. As for myself, I've done a few things. All right. My original degree is in forestry, and then I went into land survey. Some of my best experience and practice came from my forestry work. I worked around the country on the West Coast, in the Deep South, and up in New England. working where I had to, long before GPS units and cell phones and anything like that, I had to go in some very, very dense, hard to find areas, and I learned how to use a compass very well. I learned how to navigate very well. Now about you. Yes, you. Just to give me a better idea of whom I'm presenting this to, I'd like to ask you a few questions. What your skill level is, your awareness on a hike, and what you carry. So if everybody just want to go through that. So how would you do, number one, how would you estimate your skill? Would you say high, ready to explore the Northwest Passage? Up there, I have a sense of where I am always. So I get around, but I follow directions with a GPS or a human navigator. Not so hot, lead me by the hand. And poor, what's a map and compass? That's the first question.
And just so everybody knows, your answers are completely anonymous. I have no idea who's saying what, so feel free to be honest.
Okay, number two is, how much of a sense of, do you know where you are when you're on a hike? How often do you know?
All right, we'll give about 20 more seconds here.
Okay. And last is, do you hike with a GPS or a phone mapping app instead of a paper map and compass? Paper map and a compass?
Okay. And share results.
All right, let's see what we got. All right, so we're kind of split up between up there and so-so. Okay. All of the time, I'm not even sure I'm all of the time for two. All right. When you know the place. Yeah, when hike trails you hike a lot, typically know what direction, what section of the trail. That's pretty good. All right. And a lot of people just go out with an app and they don't take a paper map. Okay, that's important because knowing how to use a map is very, very important. That's what I'm going to concentrate on now. All right, I'm going to close that out. All right, let's look at my approach to what I'm teaching now. As both a trail conference volunteer and a member of a search and rescue team that regularly retrieves lost and overdue hikers in the dark typically, and preventing search and rescue chairman, I give the presentations to the young groups. I approach it from a perspective of both increasing your enjoyment of hiking as well as your safety. Many people go on hikes to reach a place like a viewpoint or a lake, but never really savor or appreciate the trip. Not keeping track of your progress and what you're passing along the way is fine when everything goes well. However, when something goes wrong, it could have dire consequences. My goal is to instill a higher sense of skill and location awareness to the hiking public. It will enhance both your safety and your enjoyment of the hike. Remember, your most valuable tool is your brain. Okay, so here's our agenda. And I'm going to try to touch on each of these. First is reading a map, what a map looks like, how to look at, how to interpret the symbols. Using a compass. Once again, this is going to be challenging because I try to make it so that I can show you as much graphically online, because this is the kind of thing you would be demonstrating in front of people in a for real setting. using map and compass together, measuring distances on the map and on the ground, plan a hike, and carry out a hike. And these are the references we sent ahead. I would strongly encourage you to consider getting the number 2 reference, Wilderness Navigation. I have this both as a paperback and on my phone as a Kindle. So it's a very, you can learn a lot from it. There's a lot of tricks for figuring out where you are. It's, you know, unfortunately, I mean, like the GPS spoils you. I learned at a time when I had no choice. So I know all the tricks for really narrowing it down where you are. So what is a map? All right, it's an illustration of an area at a point of time. For our purposes, an area on the earth. You can have a map for a sound system or something like that. So you can map lots of different things. All right, so now I got a question here, and Kendra's going to put that up. And let's see if you know the answer. What's the most important piece of information you should initially seek on a map?
All right, we'll give about 10 more seconds here.
Can you tell when people are filling it out, or?
Mm-hmm. Yep, we're almost at 100%.
Alrighty.
All right.
Ooh, North Arrow scale. Thank you very much, Kendra. The answer I was looking for was the date. Okay. How effective a map's going to be, and that really affects how you read a map. The Earth is ever changing. Every time a map is published, it's already starting to get out of date. All right. Now, this is from your second reference, Wilderness Navigation. Check the map, the date of the map, because topographic maps may not be revised very often. Although topographic maps are essential to wilderness travel, you often need to supplement them with information from visitors to the area, guidebooks, websites, and other maps. Okay, topographic maps are a very good resource, but they are limited, and I'll point that out in on other slides when it comes up. All right, take a look at that. There's a North Jersey trail map number 115. That was a 2017 printing. That's the most recent one. Using maps. Okay, let's recognize types of maps. You got road maps. You got tourist maps. You got trail and topographic maps. Now, this is kind of a tourist map. This is Washington, D.C. by the mall. All right, this is not what we're dealing with. Okay, we have to deal with the trail maps and the topographic maps. Topographics are excellent because they have terrain. You can see what the ground looks like. The old-time trail maps often just showed the trail and a little bit of information, relative information. And sometimes you always had to carry both together because you had to compare one to the other because you wanted to know if you're going in a steep area or an easy to pass by an area. Lately, the Trail Conference has done an excellent job of combining the both. The only problem with the Trail Conference is they don't have a map for every inch of the Northeast. It's mostly where there are trail circuits and stuff like that. So let's talk about using maps. 3 main things you can do with a map is to determine where you are, where you want to go, and how are you going to get there. And once you're in search and rescue, there's a 4th question. Where have I been? Because we have to see where we've searched. I'm going to show it to somebody in the command post. So let's learn how to read a map. You got to recognize symbols and features. There are man-made and there are natural features. There's some examples of man-made. Now, the guy in the middle, the water, technically that's man-made because there's a reservoir. Somebody dammed it to make that. But we put that under the natural. So let's take a look at some of the things. Now, what you're going to see on the right is what we call a legend. And there's a very large document you can get online from the USGS, U.S. Geological Survey, and they will show all of the common symbols and all their quadrangle maps. And I'll talk more about that later. Typically, when you have a regular quadrangle map, they just have a legend showing some of the prominent features on that map. So there's the man-made features, there's boundaries. Now, the thing about boundaries is sometimes you see them, sometimes you don't. Sometimes there's evidence of them, sometimes there is not. You may have monuments, you may have something showing the boundaries that you can see in the field, but sometimes it's just about knowing you get near it by a map. Okay, buildings and other features. All right, now this is an interesting thing because sometimes the building is actually the shape it looks like in the real world. And you'll see more later on. So these are like tanks. Sometimes an object that's man-made is symbolic, like down below. See these red things? All right, see that little tent? That's a campground. But to give you an example, the Sawmill Campground in High Point State Park, that's all around the shores of Sawmill Lake. However, just in one little corner, they show a little tent symbol. So you have to understand the difference between a real world object and a symbol. Parking lots are like that on the trail maps too. You just see a circle with a P, but sometimes it's not exactly where the parking lot is. All right, power lines. These are very, very important to know. They often go through wilderness areas. In survival, this is known as a baseline. If you know there's a power line to the west of you running north and south and you get confused, you lose your trail, all you need to know is you go to the west and you can hit the power line. Okay, there's all different types of roads. Once again, important to check the date on that map. I know one of the quads at Stoke State Forest there's a road that shows a Jeep trail. It's now a paved road with houses along it. Natural features. Okay, contours. They're about showing elevation and terrain. I'm going to go into more detail on that later on. Under the water, it's called bathymetric. They're called bathymetric lines. That's basically an underwater contour line. Once again, this is another big one that changes a lot. All right, I'm going to show you an example of that. Everybody go hiking and you see a wall, a stone wall going through the woods. Well, chances are that was a farm field. They almost all every piece of earth that they could farm, they did back in the turn of the century. Okay, there's water. Okay, I'm going to talk about this a little bit more ahead of time in the future. All right, physical, current or former structures that may be seen on the ground. All right, delineations, mostly on the map. All right, typically man-made is in black, but there are exceptions. All right, so here's an area up behind Port Jervis in the Port Jervis watershed. It's an old factory that was closed down and it's boarded up. All right, so look, there's a line. That's a delineation. That's actually the boundary of Port Jervis. There's a building, typical. Now you see this one actually shows the shape of the building. It's not symbolic. This crosshatched area is actually a demolished building or a debris area. There's a minor road. And there's a utility corridor. It's a cable cut. It's high tension wires. This is what it looks like in an aerial photo. And it's not precisely the same. That building looks the same. There's actually some buildings here. Now, I actually, was hiking in there. That's what it looks like from under the power line. That's a couple of Quonset huts. All right, so let's take a look at some more features as they show on the map. All right, once again, contour lines. I'll get into more detail on them in the future. There's a scale. That's a good way to figure out distance on the map. I'll show you that later on. Declination, that has to do with north. We're coming to that when we get the compass. All right, major roads. All right, probably paved. Sometimes they're divided highways. And there's a minor road. All right, now the red thing, okay, you see all these individual buildings? All right, if you see a red area, that means that there's the population of buildings are so dense that it was not practical to draw them. So they just called it like an urban area and they made it red. Port Jervis is like that too. You'll see that later. All right, forest is green. Remember, take this with a grain of salt. There's buildings. All right, there's a summit elevation. Most of the contour and elevation information is in brown on quad maps and on trail conference maps. All right, a body of water. All right, let's talk a little bit more about water features. All right, you've got stationary, lakes, reservoir canals, swamps. And you have moving water, rivers, brooks and creeks, and bayous. A lot of people don't realize what a bayou is. They think it's a swamp. Bayous are very, very slow moving rivers. I did a bayou tour down by New Orleans several years ago. And we went on this open boat and we pulled into this very, very lush area and we're sitting there and the guide's talking and he says, "You notice something?" I said, "No, what?" He said, "Anybody swatted a mosquito?" I said, "No." And he said, "You know why? Because the bayou is always moving. Mosquitoes need stagnant water to lay their eggs." So people don't realize that. All right, so there's a reservoir. All right, so typically water features are blue. There's a surface elevation of the lake. Once again, take with a grain of salt. That changes. Depends on the weather, on the flood season, and so on. All right, there's the label for the reservoir. Anybody notice anything about that? All right, there is one thing unique, because whenever you have a water body or a water course labeled, it is typically in oblique or slanted letters. So that's normal text, that's oblique text, slanted to the side. Well, let's talk about terrain. The main thing to know about terrain is contours. All right, when you learn how to read them, you can understand what you have ahead of you. You can look at a landform and you can see, you can imagine, you can look at the map and you can imagine the landforms rather. Okay, so they represent a relative elevation. It connects all the points of the same elevation. And a contour always comes back on itself. It always closes in. It may not close in on your map, but it will close in. All right, an index contour is a darker one. All right, and if you find an index, you follow it along, you should find the number with the elevation. What is an elevation? What is it? You're counting up, right? From what? What's zero? Zero is sea level. All right, and in between that is intermediate contours. They're lighter. All right, and supplementary is depressions, overhangs, and poorly visible areas. I'll show you some depressions later. All right, very important term, and you always look for this on the map. Let me just backtrack a little. That question I asked, I said the date was important. Everything's important, but the first thing you want to look for is a date. All right, you definitely want a north arrow. You definitely want the scale and whatever the other thing was. If you don't have them, you know what? It's a tourist map. Get rid of it. Okay, contour interval. Always look for this on the map. Contour interval is the distance vertically when you go between one contour and another. So if I go from here to here, I've either gone up or down 20 feet. In this case, I'm going up 20 feet from there to there. All right. Now, I don't know what the horizontal distance is. I'd have to use a scale to measure that, but I've gone up 20 feet. All right, and I know that's up. This is uphill, and I'll explain to you how I know it in a moment. So all we see is one number here, but being able to read the landform, and I'll show you why later, I know. Typical on quad maps and on trail conference maps, the contour interval is 20 feet. So when you see two lines next to each other, one is 20 feet higher than the other. Now, this is a little visual to help you visualize this is what it looks like on a map, and I'm going to turn it. So to see what the landform looks like that. All right, I think that helps you visualize a little bit more. Now look here. This is a couple of more visualizations. The bottom on the right side, that's what you see on the map. All right. This is your first lesson in reading contours. Is if they're closer together, it's steeper. When you see these close together, this is what's happening. All right. When you see these far apart, this is what's happening. All right. It's much more shallow. Now take a look here. Let me back up real quick. All right. Keep in mind, this is an average. They do aerial photography and they use photogrammetry to figure out what the landform's like. You're not going to get everything. You've got to get a sense of scale when you hike. There are things that look very big, but they're not big enough to be shown within a 20-foot contour interval. And I'm going to demonstrate that very shortly. So this is the perfect world where everything goes right between the contour lines. And this is more closer to reality. All right, you see how everything's jagged? A lot can happen in 20 or 40 feet. And let me give you an example. All right, this is a piece of the Appalachian Trail. Do you see the dashed line there? That's the Appalachian Trail just south of the High Point Park office. That building up there, that's the radio tower that they have there. 23 is just north of here, Route 23. All right. Now, I wonder what happens right in here. Okay. If you go between these two contours, I figured it out. If you figure out the percent slope, it's about 43%. That's about 19 degrees from the horizontal. Not very steep. Doesn't seem that way, right? But a lot can happen, and a lot gets lost in the East Coast because the terrain features are not as massive. There are a few places where it is. That's what's happening there. All right. I took this picture from here. You see my mouse pointer? Okay, I took the picture from here looking up the trail. The person with the orange pack is just turning left onto the trail. All right. And there's this wall there. All right. That is probably a 35, 40-foot wall. We've done some training on there. The Park Service rescue team does training on there. So here's what happened. This is the average between the contours is the green, and the red is what's the actual surface. So a lot can get lost in that. So don't be surprised when you see something that looks really steep and you thought it was just, that's why they had trails put in there so you don't have to figure out how to get across a mountain or something. All right, I'm going to show you an example of really, really intense terrain. Okay, this is El Capitan in Yosemite Park out west. This is the World Series for climbers. It's a very, very dangerous one. Now look, this is what the contours look like on El Capitan. Do you see this line here? Look at all these index contours. They're all going into that line. And that's 4. There's actually 2 more off to the right of the image. See how they all go in? By the time you get to here, there's 1,200 feet straight down. 1,200 feet of, now let's get something straight, folks. 40 feet will kill you. 1,200 feet, you just scream longer. All right. Then you bounce for 2,800 feet for the rest of the way. It's a very dangerous mountain. But the whole idea is it looks very innocent. If you don't know how to read it and you don't realize these are all coming together. And what's really happening is a straight wall, and these contours are along the side of the wall. We'll come into this again in the future. Now, in search and rescue, we have different terrain features, and we have certain names we use for them. I'm going to go into the next slide. Now, I gave you this so you can refer to it because it's a lot of stuff in there. When you look at terrain and knowing how to read them by looking at contours. All right, so these are major and minor. You might, you're familiar with valleys and ridges, familiar with hills. You might know what a saddle is. A cliff, you know what that is. So let's start looking at it by using your hand. Make a fist and put your knuckles straight up. Okay. Now, if you look at the line of your knuckles, that's like a ridge. Okay. And with the contours, you see there's the ridge line up there, and there is the ridge. That's how it looks on the map. All right. And there's another ridge line. Now, the ridge line might be smooth. It might be straight. It might break into little bitty hills. All right. Within the ridge, one of your knuckles could be called a hill. Sometimes it's a very pronounced hill, like the one in the lower right. And you see it like in the lower left on the map. Other times it just breaks out of the ridge, just a little bit sticks up. Which is kind of like the Kittatinny Ridge in New Jersey that runs from Pennsylvania up to New York State. All right, between your knuckles, all right, that would be a saddle. All right, now you see how the saddle looks on the contours. Now there are other names people use. Sometimes they'll call it a notch. Sometimes they'll call it a gap. And we know there's some gaps in New Jersey, right? Like the Delaware Water Gap. And further north, there's Culver's Gap, there's Catfish Gap. All right, the Water Gap is well named because it was formed by water, by the Delaware River running through as geologic uplift pushed the mountain up and just kept cutting through it. All right, about 15 miles south of the Delaware Water Gap is in town. And guess what the name is? Wind Gap, Pennsylvania. And right there in the middle of town is this giant wind gap in the ridge. It was formed by wind. All right, if you take your hand face up, palm up, and you cup it with your fingers lower, you kind of get a valley. Valley is basically between two ridges. It's the drainage. Now, if you cup it like you want to hold some water in your hand, all right, that's a depression. All right, that's one of those special contours. You see how it has the hash lines? So that's how you know it's going down. It's not going up like a mountain. You see those little hash lines like we have on the upper left there, and you can see them in this perspective view. What causes a depression instead of a lake is that because the aquifer below will not hold water for some reason, it permeates into it, and there are and sometimes it's intentional, like a quarry is a depression, and the only reason it's not flooded is because they're pumping it out as they're mining. The minute they stop mining a quarry, guess what? It floods. It becomes a lake. Okay, now there's special features. These are like mini ridges, and that's the middle of your finger. We call them spurs. I would have called it a shoulder at one time. All right. The trick with figuring out spurs and what's in between them is I always tell people to look for the U's and the V's. All right, you see the U and see the V? I'm talking about the shape of the contour. So you got a U-shaped contour and you got a V-shaped contour. This guy's somewhere in between. All right, the rule of thumb is if the opening is uphill, it's a spur or a ridge. Okay, now we're going to go to the one in between your fingers. It's called a draw. Some people might call it a ravine. The rule there is if the openings of the U's and the V's go downhill, you've got a draw or a ravine or a gorge or a really small valley. You see, I put the U and the V there. That's really looking for the shape of the contour line. That's what I'm talking about. See, there's a V in the contour. There aren't really any U's. This is a U in the other direction. See, there's a little spur joining here between the two streams. All right, off the edge of you is a cliff. Now, I'm going to show you a New Jersey cliff. All right, but the idea is enough contours come together that it's like a straight wall. You don't see this too much in New Jersey because most of our cliffs do not go more than 40 feet. All right, I'm going to give you an example. All right, this is the Delaware Water Gap. This is the side of Mount Mincy. It's known as Indian Head. All right, you see how these contours, they take a quick turn and they all come together, right? Now, in February, March, we had a drill with the search and rescue team, and you see my arrow, we were parked right where my arrow is, and I took this picture, all right? You see these little cliffs here? That's what you're looking at right there. Okay, let's stop for a few questions and answers. This is one pretty quick. Anybody? Anybody want to
So
know
we
anything?
do have one question in the chat, John, from Elizabeth. And it is a saddle the same thing as a coal, C-O-L?
C-O-L?
I wasn't familiar with the term either. I actually had to look it up. It's a
Okay. Yeah, you know what? I need the context.
Elizabeth, if you want to unmute yourself, you can chat.
Yeah,
where's the word coal used?
I've heard people talking about coals in the Catskills between Wittenberg and Cornell Mountain, like the coal between the two mountains that you have to climb.
That's very good.
Down and up to the next mountain. So essentially it's the same thing as a saddle that you were saying, but I've just heard the word
could be.
coal.
It's very, very, very possible. Notches, saddles, gaps, and that's probably a local thing. And I'll bet you anything, if it's the Catskill, I'll bet you anything it comes from the Dutch.
Okay,
all right.
Thanks.
I go up to the Catskills every 5 years for a family reunion to the Winter Clove Inn, and clove means stream. All right, so and it's a stream that is in the shadows and is always cold well into the warm weather, and they call it the Winter Clove Stream. So the Catskills. So I would be willing to bet that it's a Dutch origin, but it probably means something like that. The Tappan Zee Bridge. Z means sea. It's the Sea of Japan. All right, that's Dutch. So I'd be very, very. I believe it was. I would be very confident that it's probably a Dutch origin that's local to the Catskills. Anybody else?
Okay, thanks.
Brian says it's a French word, actually. But we do have another question from Andrew. What is a bald?
Where is Andrew? Can you spell that? Cole?
Bald, B-A-L-D.
Well, they have a lot of mountains with tree lines, and they're sometimes referred to as a bald mountain or something like that. Once again, it sounds like a local. All right, here we go. Cole, lowest point of a ridge, saddle books between two peaks. Typically, somebody looked it up. Okay, very good. Does it say typically? Okay, it comes from the French. Brian, does it say where it is used, or because I'd be willing to bet that's it's a regional thing. Okay, anybody else? Anything?
I don't see any more raised hands or questions.
Okay, and that is true, and that's the whole thing. That's one of the reasons why Search and Rescue decided that in working with a big situation where everybody has to have the same language, there was a decision made that we're going to use the same word for everything, or for every type of thing. All right, so we agreed this is going to be called a draw, not a ravine. This is going to be called a hill, not a summit. All right, this is going to be called a saddle, not a notch. So when somebody describes, I'm in a saddle in this part of the map on the radio, everybody knows what he's talking about. All right, so it's common terminology. That's what we look for. But that's true, and you can adapt that. But keep that in mind, that if you ever have to get on the phone and describe where you are, it might be good to use common terminology. Okay, I'm ready to get going. Let's talk about the compass. All right, compass points. Oh yeah, true or false? Compass points to the North Pole. Put that in your chat. Just say if it's true or false. Okay, one up. So far, I've seen one. Oh no, we get to see what answers. See. Oh, very good. Not exactly. That's a good one. Magnetica. Very good. Somebody got specific. All right. I think we got the picture. Definition of a compass from the dictionary: a device pointing for determining directions by means of a magnetic needle or group of needles turning freely on a pivot, pointing to magnetic north. All right. Here's a typical north sign on a map. All right. Typically, the standard is true north is the star. I guess that represents the North Star. For navigation, that's good enough. For surveying, it's not. The north, that star actually goes around the North Pole, like that. And magnetic north, typically, when it is pictured on a map, it is a half arrow. Keep that in mind. All right. This is grid north. We're not going there. The difference between grid and true north is well below, above the accuracy you work with when you're doing land navigation. That's something that surveyors need to know. If we ever get into, if we do another class on coordinates or a class on more advanced land nav, I can get into that. So let's try to describe different types of north. All right, so the red lines would be longitude lines. This is exaggerated. Keep that in mind. All right. The black lines, okay, and in every zone, UTM zone, and I'm just going to go that far. I'm not going to explain much more until we get into GPS and coordinate geometry. We'll deal that in another class. It always has a central longitude line, a central meridian. Has anybody ever heard of the word meridian? All right, it's another name for longitude line. Okay, here's a question. What time of day is it when the sun is at your meridian? All right, and I know there's going to be somebody fast that's going to come up, and that would be noon, right? It's called apparent noon. When sun is at the meridian for your time zone, that's local noon, all right? When it's before the meridian, that's anti-meridian, AM. When it's after the meridian, that's post-meridian, PM. All right, so you use meridian all the time. Some people don't even realize that. Okay, so somewhere up in Canada is a spot we call magnetic north, and it moves. It is not the same. It changes over the years, and there's been some concern that it's moving too quickly lately. We're not sure why. We worked. Okay, so there's magnetic north. All right, there's the grid lines of the UTM grid. So it's kind of like making believe you've got a flat map, even though it's a round world. All right, and the one closest to the center of the map, is totally straight. All right, so the arrow to the true north is magnetic north. That's where your needle points, at magnetic north. All right. There's your true geographic north, pointing to the North Pole. All right, the angle between them is called the declination angle. All right, there's your grid north. Once again, very, very close. This map is exaggerated. And that's the North Pole, and everybody knows what's at the North Pole. Hi, Santa. All right, so these are lines of declination throughout the United States. All right, notice this, okay? Northern New Jersey, we're usually between 12.6 and 13.2. If you're in northern New Jersey, set your compass for 13. You can't get that accurate. All right, not with a handheld compass. All right, there's this line in the Midwest here. You see it? It's called the agonic line. That's where the true north and magnetic north are the same. It's 0. All right, we call our declination 13 degrees west because it's west of north. I have worked in Oregon where it was 20 degrees east of north. All right, and you can actually set your compass that way, or you can calculate it after you take a bearing from the map. Because when you're using a magnetic needle, you have to take that into consideration. All right, so what can we do with a compass? You can take and measure bearings in the field. You can look at something and say, what direction is that? You can follow the bearings. Now, if you have, somebody gives you a bearing, they know where you are, like I'm with a field task in search and rescue, and they say, all right, from your position, go at this bearing so far, I can do that. You can measure a bearing from a map, taking bearings from a map. So you can see something on a map, a line, and figure out what the bearing is. All right, you could look at something in the real world, figure out the bearing, and then plot it on the map. All right, and you can measure, you can take bearings from a map, and you can plot the bearings on the map. All right, there are different types of compasses. I'll keep this simple. The simplest, and usually it's good enough for hiking, is the one on the right. These are called orienteering or base plate compasses. Excuse me, I dropped mine. There it is. Very, very simple. The one on the left is something used. Now, some people swear by the one below. They're military. They actually make them with straight edges now. All right, that's called a lensatic compass. It works. You cannot set declination. You can set declination on this. You can't set it on this. And I'll show you how it's done in a later slide. All right, but this isn't specifically made to use on a map. That's why you have this base that you can see through. So it can be used for orienteering and direction finding. It alone will not show you where you are, but it can help you travel in one direction. Now, if you travel in one direction with a compass and you don't have a map, you're taking a big chance, unless you know the area really well, because you can travel into a swamp or off a cliff or something like that, into some kind of big barrier. So that's why you want to use it in unison with a map. It has certain limitations. I mean, people haven't heard. I live up in northwestern New Jersey, and occasionally I go up into lower New York State, and you see signs along 209 about the New Jersey-New York land dispute. There used to be a boundary war. The property just above New Jersey is called the Black Dirt region, very, very fertile soil. They used to have land wars there. But when they came across New Jersey, the surveyors came from Pollitt Rock on the Hudson, and he surveyed across, and guess what he hit halfway? Ringwood. And guess what's in Ringwood? Lots of iron deposits. And I suspect that his compass was thrown off and he went further north. And there was a dispute between New York and New Jersey, and New York won. All right, so on a simple compass, base plate compass, you have the base plate here. All right. You have what's known as a direction of travel arrow. Here's the magnetic needle, and this is the orienting arrow. When you're orienting the compass, you actually turn either the dial or yourself with the compass until this is in the needle, or the needle is in this. We usually say, the way to remember, the memory aid is get the red in the shed. So this is like a little shed here, and the red part of the needle. Remember red, that's important. Most compasses are standardized that way. If you don't, what happens is you can accidentally pick a back bearing and if you put the white in the shed. All right, the compass housing, the bezel that has a 360 degrees, it's known as azimuth. All right, and these lines are called orienting lines, sometimes called meridian lines. They turn with this dial. They don't stay parallel with the base plate. So you orient them with the map, and I'm going to show you that in a moment. All right, now let me just show you the parts of a more complicated compass. Same kind of stuff. Magnetic needle, okay, orienting or meridian lines. There is your orienting arrow. You notice anything different from the last one? I'll show you in a second. Instead of a direction of traveling arrow, you have a sight. And I'll show you how that works. And a sighting line and mirror. There's your bezel, 2-degree graduations. In order to have 1 degree, you need a compass like this wide. scale in inches, scale in millimeters. And that's the UTM scale. That's when you start getting into coordinates. You're not dealing with that now. Clinometer, that's when you want to figure out slope. That's for another class. There's your declination. You notice how the orienting lines are not in the same direction as the red arrow, the red shed? All right, because that has declination set in that compass, which was different from the last compass, remember? All right, so when you have it set for your area, the problem is that you're only going to use it in one area. If I go to Connecticut, I got to set it to 14. If I go to California, I got to set it to like 15 east, to the other side of north. You see, this is to the west of north. There's north there. All right, now I'm going to show you about the proper compass stance. Hopefully this works so you can hear it. I may have to voice over. Proper stance. Can you hear that? Hold the compass directly in front of you. Look down and turn your whole body. Don't just twist. Once the compass needle lines up, then you look straight up and find a landmark. Look down, look back up again. If you don't see it, try it again. Could you make that out? All right.
I would recommend just reiterating that, John. It was a little fuzzy.
Okay, so basically, if somebody, this is if you're given a bearing or you take a bearing from a map and you want to see, okay, what direction is this object on the map? What you do is you set the bearing in your direction of travel. In the case of this compass, it would be here. All right. If you took it from the map, you add 13 degrees and you put that bearing in here with the direction of travel. You hold it directly in front of you and you turn your whole body until the two needles line up. Then you look straight up and you look for your landmark. All right. Don't twist. Because what you're going to do, especially if you're in heavy brush, you're going to stow the compass, you're going to turn straight, you're going to look in the wrong direction. All right, you got to turn your whole body. Your toes have to be pointed in that direction. Okay, let me see. So this is what I was telling you about setting a bearing. All right, once you determine the bearing, you turn the bezel dial. Now I'm going to show you how to use the mirror compass in a moment. All right, so instead of the sighting mirror, you have a direction of travel. Now, when you use a direction of travel, you're holding it in front of you, in front of your chest. Okay, when you use the sighting mirror, you're holding it in front of you like this. All right, so this is how the sighting mirror works. There's your eye here. All right, and you're looking at your sight. And then you're looking at the reflection and you're watching the dial at the same time. That's what the mirror is for. All right, so it can be used. Now, so on a map, a compass can be used like a protractor. All right, it's got 360-degree dial. Protractor. So as you turn this, you can get an angle by getting the difference between these lines in the back of the dial and the lines on the side of the base. So that's your straight edge, and then magnetic, you totally ignore the magnetic needle. All right, so let's take a look at it here. Your position. Now, this is either the object that you're sighting or the destination you want to go to. You're ignoring the needle. You don't care about it now. All right, there's your orienting or meridian lines in the back. You notice how they're not going in the same direction as these lines on the, or as the edge of the base plate. There's your vertical grid lines, the meridians. And then you read the degree. Once you have this set up, you read the degree from here. Now, if you see an object and you say, I'm not sure what that is in real world, I'm looking at, so I'm going to look at that and I'm going to take a degree. And then what you do is you've got that degree in your compass and you put the compass in front of you and you turn until your needles are lined up and you look up and hopefully you see it. Let's say you're on a lookout point and you do that. Okay, so we got a short bearing exercise. if people printed out that map, I was hoping they would. If you want to try to do a protractor, what I want you to try and do is try as best you can with your compass or your protractor, give me an azimuth angle from that little pennant flag, sighting spot, the base of that, to where the bridge crosses the state line. And then we'll put it, when everybody's about ready, we'll put up a poll and see if everybody gets it right. When you have a number, just put it in the chat that I'm done. I think that's the best thing. That's a good idea. There it is. And if you're not sure exactly what I'm explaining, I'm going to show it to you after we do the poll. Are people polling, Kendra?
I just realized I'm on mute talking to myself. I was saying yes. Sorry. Yes, we're about halfway there, so I was just going to give 5 more seconds for people to answer.
That's right. Let me. I'm going to grab something. I'll be right back. Ooh, very good. Okay, 189. Now, those other 3 answers are relevant. 9 is actually the back bearing. That's what would have happened if you put the compass with the red down. Okay, and 54 and 234 are both 90 degrees to that. So what you wanted to do, we're going to start. Oh, here we go. Okay. All right, so I darkened the grid lines. There's the line that you're measuring. There's the grid lines. All right, so your rear lines on your dial, your meridian lines are parallel to one of these grid lines. All right, the direction of travel, the edge goes right towards your goal. All right. So basically that's the angle you're establishing. And if you read it off your compass, you should get 189 or close. All right. Remember, we're in a lower degree of accuracy. So it could be, if you say 188, 180, 190, you're in the ballpark. Now, you remember something about navigation. It's not the same as survey. Survey is pinpoint accuracy. Navigation is visual or hailing distance. That's your goal. All right. And this whole point of what I'm trying to teach is that you can't just do it with the compass alone. You have to be reading the terrain, looking for landmarks, and checking yourself. Now, also, you can measure a distance on the map. Now, if you look at the map scale, and graphic scale is probably the best, this scale is great unless you enlarge the map or make it smaller. Simplest thing to do on a scale is to put a card or a piece of paper against it. You can make your own scale and just make little hash marks. And then later on, you can get a distance just by putting that card there. and measuring the same distance. Now, this is not accurate. It happens to be 0.56 mile. All right, to measure distance on the ground, this is a handy thing. I would suggest to anybody who is interested, consider doing this. All right. Pacing is a good way to check distances. If you know you've got it, certain things are so far apart, you can pace between them when you're looking on a map. All right, it's the simplest form. It's very, very useful. I use it all the time. It's a good thing to get into the habit of doing. I used to use it all the time before GPS. You can figure out that this is the simplest thing to do is if you have a 100-foot tape or a 50-foot tape or something like that, just walk it. Now let's look at what a pace is. A pace is 2 steps. Okay, so when you're walking, every time one of your feet hits the ground, that's 1 pace. So it's step 1, step 2. All right, so it's 2 steps. I know that my pace is about 5 feet and about 1.5 meters. So if I need to know what the distance is, I can figure it out rather quickly. And needless to say, this I had to do before there were GPS units and any other way, more accurate measurements. All right, so basically that's your pace there. And it's a good little, it's a good thing to do. It's a good thing to do with your family. If there's anybody here with kids watching, go up and teach them how to measure their pace. And also in the references, that first compass course, see if you can print that out. It's a very easy thing to set up. It's only like a 50-foot circle. And you can practice doing bearings around this circle. All right, so you want to take a hike. All right, so you're at this parking lot here on Waterloo Road. This is Alamucci. And you want to get to this lookout point, this star. Now, what would happen if you went straight there? All right. This is a good thing for knowing how to read terrain. All right. Alamucci is you saw the Water Gap, right? That's a big climbing area. Alamucci is the other big northern New Jersey climbing area. All cliffs down here. Actually, right below that star is a cliff. Hard to tell from our contours. All right, that's what your profile looks like. There's the parking lot, that's the star. If you went straight along that line, see how fast you go up? That's pretty intense, okay? Now, how about we try taking trails? So we have the white trail to the Pebble Loop, which is yellow, to the Highlands Trail, which is a turquoise color diamond, like that. I'll just have you know, I used to teach a course in what I'm teaching now in the field. And this is the hike I used to take people on. So it's a little less intense. And the good part is you're on a trail, so it's easier to get up this. All right. So we're along the way. All right. So these are your trailblazers. I'm hoping most people understand what these mean. Straight ahead is just a regular blaze. Left turn and right turn. When I started hiking back in the 70s, it used to just be 2 trailblazers, one on top of the other. And you knew right or left by what side of the trail it was on. I think somebody finally figured out there ain't enough trees in the right places that they had to figure out a different way of showing it. All right, trail begins, trail ends. All right, trails are not sidewalks. Sometimes you get lucky. This is a nice trail. This is the Appalachian Trail going across the Wallkill Valley in Vernon, just before Stairway to Heaven. This is the easy part. Then you go up the mountain. This is what most trails look like. This is one of my favorite trails. This is the Blue Dot and High Point. You got to climb through that just to get through. All right, same trail, straight up this hill. There you go. That's a reality. That's what trails often look like. All right. You see, this is the Appalachian Trail on the Kittatinny Ridge. There he goes. There's a trail blaze right there. All right, there's a trail blaze for the Blue Dot. All right, this is High Point. This is going up one of the rock scrambles in the Appalachian Trail on the first day hike this past January. All right, I was up at the Port Jervis watershed overlooking Port Jervis, and I came around. Now, this is all mountain biking area. Lots of curvy trails all around because they just do it like an amusement ride. They're going over bumps and stuff like that. And somebody had this caution tape, and I wondered why. And I found out why, because there was a cliff right there. This is another thing you can look at. This is where I was standing when you saw that. All right, that's the spot where I was standing right there. You see, you can just about make out a cliff there. It's just like right over Port Jervis. That's where the picture was taken from. All right, now this is a big pet peeve of mine. This is called decision points. That's a search and rescue term. All right, now look at this map. Now look at that red trail. It's actually blue color. It's the Blue Mountain Loop. It's also co-aligned with the Parker Trail, which was my trail. I maintained this trail. All right. Now, if you look at this, wouldn't you say this is like a really thick trail here, and there's just a little bitty thing coming off to the side? Is that what you would look for if you were hiking? All right. This is what it really looks like. You see that? There's your turn there. The main trail is actually this going this way. Okay. And there's a turn, and this becomes a narrow trail all the way to the road. All right. Areas like this, we call this a decision point. All right. When somebody is lost and they're supposed to be hiking a trail, one of the things we do is we send people to the decision points where they could accidentally go the wrong way. Now, this is not a big deal here because both of these go to the same road, so you'd be out anyway. But in the deep forest, that can send you off. A lot of these big roads, they peter out. They were old. New Jersey is full of old woodland industries, logging, mining. There are roads everywhere. And sometimes trails co-align. You saw those rough trails that we had before? Then you hit a road like this is a pleasure. You love walking on it, and you don't even bother looking at the blazes because it's so easy to follow. And before you know it, the trail goes off to your left, and you're walking around, and then you look up and, wait, where are the blazes? All right? You need to be very, very cognizant of blazes, all right? If you're following a trail that has a certain color, pay attention to it. If you look up and you realize you don't see any blazes ahead, stop. Don't keep walking, stop, and the first thing you do is turn around and look for your last blaze, all right? And I'm going to show you some examples. I had another example of this hiking yesterday in Huckleberry Ridge State Forest in Lower New York. Oops, I went the wrong way. Oops. All right, lots of history, lots of fields. All right, take a look at that. Now, when Kendra was teaching the trail maintaining class, remember what she was saying about when you do a turn? What's the first thing you do after a turn? You have a confirmation blaze, right? You see the blaze? This was the confirmation blaze up a Huckleberry Ridge. Look at that. You barely can make it out with lichens. And there was a big, heavy trail going off to the right. And anybody who didn't know anybody would have followed that trail. And this was crossing a stream. So this is about why you want to be more situationally aware. All right, observe as you go. Think about where you're going. Look at the trail. This is what you remembered. You remember the trailhead. You went down a trail. You turned left. You went down a trail to see. You turned right. And you took a bearing on a trail and you said, how come I'm going south? No, this is what you forgot. You started at the trailhead and you forgot all about the long gradual arc of the trail. You forgot that that wasn't a right angle intersection. And then you went down the trail and now you're going south, all right? Little things like that. That's why it's great to work with your map as you go. Don't just say, I'm going to this lookout and I'm not going to stop until I reach it. Observe, look around, see what things, you should be saying to yourself, okay, I should see a mountain on this side of me. The hill rise on this side of me. I should see a stream crossing me. Look for these things as you hike. So here's a little idea of looking at landmarks. Okay, there is a utility corridor, and there it is on the map. Okay, there's a bridge over the Delaware. All right, there it is. These are all places, things you can cite. All right, a public building, a church. Typically a church is a little cross on a building. A school is a little triangular pennant. And look at the shape of the land. Now, if you looked at that, would you know what it looks like on the ground, on the map rather? All right, see the map? That makes sense. Orienting your map using the land. All right, by looking at that utility corridor, you can take your map and you can turn it so it's oriented to the real world. Figuring out where you are. Now, this is a little complicated and this is going to take practice. May have to do it in the field. If we ever do this real world, I can demonstrate it better. But you're standing somewhere in High Point and you see the southern end of this building here. All right, that's the interpretive center at High Point. And you take this bearing and you draw it on your map from that building. Then you see the High Point Monument. You take this bearing and you draw it with the straight edge of your compass on the map. Then you see the radio tower. That's this thing here. All right, it's hard to see it. It's in the trees there. You draw that line, and where are you? Right there. Okay, so let's get an idea of reading terrain. Okay, I took a picture on this trail. Taken around midday. Okay, the first poll is, which map picture do you think we're at? You have to, A, B, C, or D.
All right, we'll give about 10 more seconds.
The clock is running.
All right.
All right. Almost 84% got B, and that is it. Let's take a look at it. I purposely said midday. Look at the way that shadow's going. It's at my back. So look at that. I'm looking almost north, in a northerly direction. All right. It's higher to the left of me. It's lower to the right. Okay, look how the land in the background, far away, is starting to curve to the left. All right, it's going into this little draw here. You're on a spur, it's going into the draw. Okay, let's go to the next one. All right, once again, A, B, C, or D. This is not midday. I don't know if that was midday, but I don't think that'll help you there. All to be one right.
About 5 more seconds.
All right, C was the answer. Okay, you're looking. All right, you notice it goes down on both sides. It's kind of rising to this hill here. All right, so you're on part of a small hill on a ridge. All right, once again, A, B, C, D. I think this one should be easy.
About 5 more seconds.
Okay, A is the answer. 71%. Okay, look at that. That's a draw there, or a little ravine there. You see it coming down? Actually, the trail actually crosses here. Just out of sight is a bridge right there. And there is a very active stream going down the middle of it. Okay. And I believe this is the last one. Got to look very closely. There's a few things that are hard to notice.
Five more seconds.
All right, D. I think that was pretty obvious. You see a big open area. It's hard to tell. If you look up here, you can see the wires going across. That's a high tension line right there. Okay. These utility corridors can be very, very useful in navigation. All right. They're great ways of, and it's known as a baseline. It's actually not a search and rescue term. Baseline for search and rescue means something else. That's when you start a search, a grid search through the woods. You start at a baseline. A baseline for survival and navigation means something that runs, and in orienteering it's known as a handrail. It's something that's easy to follow somewhere. All right, so you don't have to worry about following your compass. Just get on the handrail and follow it. Now you see that this one running down here, that goes right back to where I started from. My car was parked at the other end of that utility line. So if I got lost in the woods, all I have to do is walk to that utility line. If I lost my trail, and bingo, just go right back. Okay, question and answers. And this is it, folks.
So either raise your hand or go ahead and type into the chat box if you have any questions. Nothing?
Oh, looks like somebody liked it. Another guy I know from South Jersey was search and rescue. He had to leave early, but he said it was great information. That's good.
All right, it doesn't look like we have any questions.
Okay, now we have check boxes here, so you can pick as many as you'd like. All right, and these are ideas for future classes.
So we did just have somebody raise their hand. John Rushman, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. Go ahead and ask your question.
Okay, John.
I understand that sometimes map makers would put features in their maps that weren't really there to kind of copyright the map. Does the Trail Conference do anything like that? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Not to my knowledge. They may put certain symbols or emblems. They're not going to put something that's inaccurate intentionally. They may have like a copyright symbol or something like that. You're talking about something like showing something inaccurately. So if somebody knows it's not, I don't know.
So someone couldn't copy the map and claim it's theirs.
I mean, it's kind of like what the mint does. You know, they have like a line that goes through the dollar bill in case you try to photocopy it or something. I don't know. I don't know offhand. I am, you know, I make my own maps at times, but I'm not a regular cartographer. They might. Oh, of course, if they did tell you, then it would defeat the purpose. The idea is you're not supposed to know. But they'll never do anything that's going to endanger you, that's going to get you lost by showing something inaccurately.
Yeah, we do put branding on it, obviously, but I have not ever heard our cartographer talk about doing that. But I can definitely check with him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, somebody asked, once we stop with the distancing, am I going to do? Yeah, of course. That was my original plan, was to do the in-person training, probably meet at the Trail Conference headquarters and do a hike, probably up to Hawk Rock and go around on maybe the Vista Loop or something like that in the Arapahoe Reservation. And what I typically do on this type of class, when I was doing it with the guiding service, is I would let people take turns leading, and I would stop at certain times and ask questions. Everybody, do we know where you are? And I'll ask them to point it out on the map and along those lines. So I'm looking forward to the time when I can do that. And that will be on, that would be the navigation hike once the restrictions are lifted. I also am in charge, I already mentioned this, we call it PSAR, Preventing Search and Rescue. I go to a lot of the youth groups and sometimes older groups too, talking about how to avoid getting lost and what to do if you do get lost. There is a national program called Hug a Tree, teaching young people to stay in one place. Trees don't move, neither should you. And teaching them how to bring some very simple things to help survive. And we love to spread the word. And I didn't mention, I mean, Trail Conference is volunteer and they accept donations. And we are also a volunteer organization. We do not charge for our services. And if you go to the njsar.org and you are be interested in donating, we would be glad. We accept any donation as small as you want. We also, if you're interested in this kind of outdoor stuff and you think you might want to be a member, once the restrictions are over, we usually meet on the first Wednesday of every month, and we have our new person orientation at 7 p.m. So at 7 post meridian, okay?
So John, you do have one other question from Joe, who's asking, when do you set compass declination?
Okay, first you look at your map and get the declination. Now, there are things on online. You can get the declination from your zip code. You can look it up. If you have a compass that allows you to set declination, the simple ones like this guy do not allow you to set declination. Then what you do is you have to calculate it. So if I take an angle, a bearing from the map, and I want to see what it looks like in the real world, I got to add 13 degrees in northern New Jersey. All right. Most maps will give you declinations. Look at that angle, all right? I mean, I made a mistake. I was using the wrong declination when I got back into this stuff. Because when I was a Boy Scout down in Warren County, I used to use an old map, and I remembered it was 11 degrees. And I didn't even bother to look at a regular quad map. And I was doing all this mapping, pacing, and before I had my GPS up in High Point. And I had to turn everything by 2 degrees. But look in your area. You can not only can you find out the declination, and I wish I could show you because I actually found an old silver mine exploration up in High Point, and somebody drew a hand-drawn map in 1957. And I had to go back, and there's a place where you can actually go find what the declination is at an area at a date. And it's remarkable the things you can do. But yeah, it can get rather intense. Try to start off slow, all right? Just remember, I mean, some people, they'll take their own maps and they'll customize it and they'll put magnetic lines across the map instead of using the true north lines. So you could do that too. There are many options. It takes time. You've got to do it. You've got to practice it. If you use it, if you don't use it, you lose it. All right. It takes a lot of practice. I got the practice because it was my job. I had to do it. I had no choice. So I became good at it. I've got the muscle memory now, but other people, you got to get into the woods. Just like I tell the people in search and rescue, you got to hike a lot. You got to be in the woods. You got to see normal. Any other questions?
John Rushman, do you have another question, or did I just forget to lower your hand?
I have another question.
Okay, go for it.
There is a list on the web of the 51 peaks in New Jersey that are over 1,000 feet. And I've been trying to get to all those peaks, and it takes a fair amount of bushwhacking. First of all, does the Trail Conference, do they discourage bushwhacking? And is there any place that you could recommend on how to improve those skills? Because it's kind of similar to what we were talking about tonight.
Well, I am a big-time bushwhacker and being in search and rescue. There are places where you can't do it. You cannot do it in the Cooser area in High Point. It's not a good idea to do it a lot, all right, if you don't have to, because that actually does damage to the environment. But it is common. There are actually peaks up in the Catskills. They have the 3500s. And several of them, it's the only way you can get to it is by bushwhack, all right? But you got to use it sparingly, especially now when people are like flocking everywhere, you know. don't make it any worse. Okay. It's best to stay on trails, especially if you're inexperienced. And you don't have it. You don't do it without your 10 essentials of survival gear in your pack. You can look that up. The 10 essentials are in these different references, especially mountaineering, freedom of the hills, things you want to carry every time you're out in the wilderness. Do it sparingly. That's what I would say. Okay. There are places where you cannot do it. And don't bring large groups off trail. I would say that. Yeah, if you go into a specific place like once to go to this one peak, fine. I didn't realize it was 50 over 1,000. Maybe they're mostly along the Kittatinny Ridge, and I think there might be some in the highlands.
They're along the Kittatinny Ridge, and there's from Washington up to Ringwood. There's another ridge of mountains or hills.
Right, that's the Highlands, the New Jersey Highlands.
Right.
I've never even thought about that. I guess they wanted to compete with the 3500s and the Catskills or something. There was another one in West Milford. I think there are the like the 500s or something like that, I think. But yeah.
It looks like somebody set this website up about 15 years ago, and very few people are doing it now. It's me and a couple other people are doing these skills now.
If you really are a good steward of the land, you don't make a habit of going off trail if you don't have to. So if you do want to go visit these ridges, don't bring a large crowd and don't make a big deal out of it, And I used to do this thing called letterboxing. It's like geocaching. And I had a letterbox that was about 100 feet off a trail right by High Point. And I ended up moving it, taking it away from there because I saw a trail was starting to form. I said, nah, it's not good. So I got it out of there. All right. Especially being close to the city, there's a lot of potential for population. So we're getting kind of late now. How's everybody doing?
We have two more questions if you just want to answer them quick. So
Sure.
One is meridian lines are true north, correct? And second is, can you recommend a compass brand or a compass app?
I'm sticking to brands. I don't trust an app for a compass. You really can't sight well with the phone. It's a good backup, get you oriented. And I can teach you how to find north and stuff without a compass too. That's just using the sun. One of the best brands is Silva. Both of these are Silva, but try to get the Silvers that come from Scandinavia. All right. There was a bad batch for a while there after they got bought out. Brunton is another brand. All right. Needless to say, you get what you pay for. Hiking, regular hiking, you don't need the most complicated compass. You need a good compass if you start orienteering. Orienteers, they're the people who do a lot of bushwhacking. All right. But Silva, Silva, and try to get the newer ones now because they're starting to make them again. If you get the ones that are made in the United States, it's supposedly not as good. I got a knockoff compass the other day, and I got what I paid for it, and it pretty much fell apart. The screw came out for the declination, and there was a while the needle came off the head. I said, forget it. Now I'm going to get a good one again. My old one got a bubble in it. My one from like 30 years ago. When it gets cold, sometimes bubbles form. That's what makes the compass nice, is that the needle doesn't wiggle around a lot because it's liquid filled. But the problem with the liquid fill is that sometimes if you have it in extreme weather, a bubble will form. So the best that I can recommend is Silva. Now there's also Sunto, Suunto. I have used them. They're a very good brand. I use them down south. They have a Sunto brand that you hold up to your eye like this, but you can't use it well with a map, and you can't set declination, and they're very expensive. And there's also Brunton. So I would say that. And yes, meridian lines are north and south. East and west are the latitude lines, sometimes called parallels. All right, so you had the prime meridian for the meridian in the middle of a map and the standard parallel. All right. Good luck with the one. Okay, anything else?
Great. So I don't think we have any more questions right now, but so folks know, we will be sending out a follow-up email with some resources and the recording to this webinar, so if you want to reference things. And we'll also include in that email a survey, if you don't mind. It's like literally just 3 quick questions, if you don't mind answering that as we continue on our journey of digital engagement, which is new to us. Your feedback is helpful. And then last call to action too would be if you want to volunteer. Like we said, we are a service-powered organization and really depend on our volunteers. So just let us know if you have any interest in becoming, you know, anything from a trail maintainer to an invasive surveyor, and lots of things in between. So thank you so much for your time, John. Thank you so much for this.
You're welcome.
We really appreciate you hosting this.
Right. Anybody has any questions? I don't know if you have my contact there, but I'd be glad to answer them. Okay.
We can share that if you want, John.
Okay. Share the Gmail one. All right.
Perfect. Will do.
Okay. Thank you very much. All right.
Thank you all. You all have a wonderful night. Bye.
So I'm starting to see faces now. Okay, there you go. Okay. All right. Goodbye.
Goodbye.